Welcome to Dave Talks Ball in this September 19th, 2024 episode. Guys, y'all know how I feel about Thursdays during the season. It's what we work towards all week. Just starting to rewatch these games on Sunday. We're putting the previews out. For people who hadn't seen, I was just talking to our guest on the show this week. The first time, we'll get you off for just a minute. So the first time you see all these previews when we put it out starting on Sunday, Monday night, Chris Phillips, Cole Thompson, myself, I feel like those two do a phenomenal job breaking down these games. Again, I'm going to preview all of them for you this week, essentially basically the main four games. But if you haven't got a chance to go catch those out, please go do. But tonight, it's prediction, folks. Prediction day. Thursdays, it's always prediction day. We love it. Four big matchups we're going to break down. We're breaking down the Tennessee-Oklahoma game. Obviously, in Norman, that's where I feel like everybody and their grandmother is at this week, which makes sense. Everybody's kind of circled this game when the SEC announced the schedule, I feel like 2 summers ago, before we even had dates, that the Josh Heupel homecoming to Norman. So we'll talk about that one. We also have our buddy Dave Hooker coming over from Off the Hook Sports. Will help us break down that game. We'll also talk about the Arkansas-Auburn game, Florida-Mississippi State. Who the hell knows about that game? That could go a ton of different ways. And then finally, we got Vanderbilt, Missouri. It's not going to be the undefeated showdown we thought, but still a conference game we got to cover. And speaking of our guy, Dave Hooker from Off the Hook Sports, dude, let me share the screen here. Let me at least pull it up myself. Dude is a prediction machine here, dude. Somebody tweeted Ron Collins. He says he's listening to Dave Hooker the rest of the way because listen to Dave's predictions on Tennessee's first 3 weeks. Check out the prediction in the final score here. Dave predicted Tennessee 63, Chattanooga 13. The final was 69-3. It's pretty dang close right there. Tennessee 52, NC State 17, 51-10, pretty close. And then the closest one he's got so far, Tennessee 70, the Fighting Nick Sabans and the Golden Flashes from Kent State. Dave said would score 3 points. They scored 0. They scored the big donut, the big goose egg. So I'm excited to see Dave's prediction here off the hook. Hey, one of the guys I've started to follow, recently found him. I started to recently follow him from Tennessee perspective. So glad he will be able to join us on the show tonight. Some other stuff to talk about. What are some potential narratives we could potentially be talking about after week 4? It may not be something Tennessee fans want to hear. It may not be something Auburn fans want to hear. And this isn't a prediction by me. Hear me out. This is just looking at it from the other side. What could we be saying after week 4? Then, as you know, it's money-making weekend. It's week 4 money-making weekend. I have 8 really good bets for you. But let's get right to it before Dave joins us. Let's get quickly. Well, let's get that. Let's pay some bills. Game Time app, this show, the Dave Talks Ball show, about episode 8 or 9 here for us, is sponsored by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app and use code SECU for $20 off your first purchase. Hey, if you're going to a game this weekend, whether you're in Norman, whether you're an Arkansas fan, you're trying to get last-minute tickets to the Auburn game, go use our guys at the Game Time app. I use them all the time. I just moved to Atlanta. I've already used them for a Braves game a couple of times. Make sure you're hitting all fees. So, again, you know how some of these apps are. They're going to think it's a $20 ticket. You end up paying about $60. So make sure you got all the notifications, you got the links checked and stuff like that. But, guys, this episode is again, brought to you by our buddies over at Game Time app, and go get your $20 off your first purchase. But let's get to it first, guys. Let's get to it. What are some potential narratives that could happen after week 4? Let's get right to it. I know our guy Dave's off the stage here. He may not like this one. Again, this isn't a prediction. You've seen my prediction for the Tennessee game. We've had it out. But Tennessee struggles on the road with Josh Heupel could be a narrative we're talking about. That could be a narrative we're talking about. Heupel would be 5-8 with a loss to Oklahoma and Brent Venables. In his 13 SEC road games going back to his first season in 2021, with 4 of those 5 road wins being at Kentucky and at Vanderbilt. And is obviously the biggest win he's had on the road is that, it was a noon, 11 a.m. local kickoff against LSU a couple years ago in 2020. That's kind of when Tennessee's springboard game to their 22 season kind of took off. A lot of people predicted them to lose to LSU going into that game. I think LSU fumbled a kickoff to open up the game. And then his bombs over Baghdad. I think Tennessee was up like 21-3 at half. Hendon Hooker, who was Jalen Hyatt. I think Brew McCoy had a big game as well. You'll see Brew McCoy on Saturday as well. But But if Josh Heupel and Tennessee were to lose this, I think that would be a fair talking point heading into week 5. Tennessee potentially struggles on the road, especially if it's an underwhelming performance offensively. Again, he would be 5-8 in his 13 SEC road games in his 4 seasons. Again, he'd have 3 more this year. And 4 of those 5 wins would be Kentucky and Vanderbilt. So 2 wins against Kentucky, 2 wins against Vanderbilt. Maybe not. It would be a little too early to be talking about this. But when is the big road game coming, big win? And again, at Tiger Stadium can be labeled as one. Hell, LSU won the SEC West that year, folks. So it's a big one. But I don't know. I think some people don't give it credit because it wasn't at night. Yeah, that's nitpicking. But I think it would be a fair argument to talk about this if Tennessee were to drop the game on Saturday night. The other one, there's 2 more. 2025 is a make-or-break season for Hugh Freeze. I think that's a legitimate conversation if he loses this game Saturday at home against Arkansas. And we'll get in the previews. And if you follow me on social media, I've said it all week. I think the wrong team's favored in that game. I think I've seen a little more from Arkansas when you talk about their first half against Oklahoma State. They did nothing right in that second half and still almost won, took it into overtime. I don't really hold the UAB game against them. Travis Williams, one of my buddies, the defensive coordinator at Arkansas, he had his 4th kid last week. Sam Pittman told him to go home and just literally come to practice. So there wasn't, I'm not going to take the lazy way out and just say, hey, they didn't really prepare. I don't really think they took that game as serious as they should have. If you ever listened to Mac and Cube out of Birmingham, they had Trent Dilfer, the UAB coach on. We all remember Trent Dilfer, the former quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens, Super Bowl winner. He talked about kind of the game plan and how aggressive Travis Williams is. And that is true. I mean, Sam Pittman at SEC Media Days, I think he said they were in cover 0 last year, 58, 60 times, I think, last year. So Travis Williams, I was with him at UCF, his first time as a coordinator. He is a very aggressive guy. He likes to be aggressive, create turnovers, get teams in negative situations. So that's just what he wants to do. It would not be surprising. I think Arkansas wins this game. I think Auburn's going to be 2-2 after this weekend, 0-1 in conference. And then they're staring 5-7, 6-6 right down the barrel. Now, does Hugh Freeze get fired this year? I don't think so. No, I don't think there's really any chance. But it'd be a very disappointing year 2, and I think he should have won 8 games. I think he underachieved last year. And I talked about that on Is This a Must-Win Game for Hugh Freeze on the SEC Unfiltered platform channel on YouTube. Go check out that video. Got posted, I think, last night. But if he loses this game, 2025 is going to be make or break, because you got to think they're going to go get a quarterback out of the portal. They're going to give away their firstborn child, I should say, for a quarterback out of the portal. They're going to have to. Auburn's going to go set the market for the transfer portal quarterback market. I mean, they are. No, but even if they win this game, Hugh Freeze needs one of these next 2, either this week against Arkansas or against Oklahoma. You lose this, again, you've kind of given away all the recruiting momentum you had back in the spring and summer. But if he loses, I think it's fair to start talking about it. Is 2025 the year for him? And then finally, are we talking about this again? What SEC team is going to be taken to the brink unexpectedly for a 4th straight weekend? Week 1, we had Old Dominion, South Carolina went down to the wire. Alabama, South Florida, wouldn't say went down to the wire, but the score was definitely, the final was definitely not how the game went. I mean, it's a 1-point game going to the 4th. Houston, Oklahoma, that was back. I think the final was 14-12. A Nicholls State, LSU, that was a close game. Cal, Auburn. Cal obviously got the best of Auburn. Last week, Georgia, Kentucky, unexpectedly close. Toledo just does whatever the hell they wanted to do against Mississippi State this past weekend at home. That was just a total, for lack of a better term, just butt kicking across the field, man. Give Toledo and them credit. Georgia State getting the win against Vanderbilt, ruining their undefeated season. Then UAB, Arkansas, we mentioned it earlier when talking about Hugh Freeze. That was a close game this past week. But who is it this week? I mean, Ohio at Kentucky. Kentucky's a 20-point favorite. I don't really trust Kentucky's offense against anybody right now. Bush Hamden, Brock Vandagriff don't really feel like they have anything going. There's really no – what's kind of the best way to put it? They have no identity offensively. I mean, that South Carolina game, too, which I cannot get out of. It was one of the worst offensive performances I've seen in a major college football game with a modern offense in a long – maybe since the 3-2 Auburn-Mississippi State game back in 2008. It was bad. 2 quarterbacks combined for 42 yards between Gavin Wimsatt and Brock Vandagriff. It was bad. I don't think Ohio straight up wins, but this game could be closer. Bowling Green at Texas A&M. A&M's favored by 23. Bowling Green took Penn State down to the wire. They were off last week. A&M's coming off that high of getting their first SEC road win. in Mike Elko's first SEC road game, they broke the 2-year win streak, going back to 2021 with Jimbo Fisher. Could be a little bit of a sleepy game. UCLA at LSU. I don't really think it's going to be this one because I don't think UCLA is very good this year, but you never know. LSU's coming off another big emotional win against South Carolina this past week. And then Vandy at Mizzou. The conference game, we mentioned Kentucky to Georgia last week. That was close. I don't think this one will be, but these are the kind of the 4 games I would keep an eye on. Ohio at Kentucky, Bowling Green at A&M, and UCLA at LSU and Vandy at Missouri. Post in the comments, folks, who do you think potentially could be this, kind of scary game for an SEC team? There's been 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 in the first 3 weeks of the season, but narratives we aren't ready to discuss. Again, just recapping it, Tennessee struggles on the road. If they lose this game, Josh Heupel will be 5-8 in his 13 SEC road games, again, with 4 of those 5 wins being on the road at Kentucky and Vanderbilt. Hugh Freeze loses on Saturday. I think 2025 is a real hot seat year for him. I really do. And then finally, it's been done 3 weeks in a row. Like I just mentioned, who is the team this week? It gets taken to the brink in the SEC unexpectedly, either by an out-of-conference MAC team or maybe it's Vandy taking Missouri down to the wire in the 4th quarter at Faurot Field. But I told our guy we'd get him on here. We're going to preview this Tennessee game. My guy, Dave Hooker. Dave, it was a pleasure talking to you off there, man. I appreciate you joining us tonight. But guys, Dave Hooker from Off the Hook Sports. Give him the follow at the Dave Hooker. Dave, tell us a little bit how you got – I love talking to you off there. Tell us a little bit how you got started, how you built Off the Hook Sports, background in Tennessee, just your background in the profession before we really get into this Oklahoma-Tennessee game.
Sure. I started covering Tennessee full-time in 1998. That turned out to be a pretty good year. So when they won the national championship, covered them for what was then WNOX radio. Now it's a Sports Animal. And until 2005, then wrote for the Knoxville News Sentinel, worked for ESPN for a couple of years, and then I decided it was time that I wanted to go do my own thing. So here we are. I guess there's another Dave in town in the YouTube channel talking about SEC football.
I do. I knew I liked you for some reason, dude. It's a very, very strong name, dude. I like it.
That's right.
Dave, let's get into it. Again, I don't want to keep you too long tonight. I appreciate you taking the time. But before we get into this game, what is a big surprise for you in the SEC so far, outside of Knoxville, outside of Tennessee? Like, what is a team, maybe a position group side of the ball that you're like, I was pleasantly surprised, or maybe even from a negative standpoint, you're like, yeah, they're worse than I thought?
Well, that's a good question. I guess I would say 2 things, and they're both positive. Texas is probably a rung better than I thought. I thought they would be good, but I thought they would be the 3rd best team in the SEC, and that might prove to be true. But right now, if I had to pick, they're probably the best team in the SEC. If I were to do a power poll, which our Caleb Calhoun does that on offthehooksports.com. And then the other, I would say, again, is a positive. I like what I see out of Jalen Milroe at Alabama. That's fitting into a whole different type of offense. And most of the teams in the SEC haven't been challenged yet. So everything I'm saying could change in the course of just a couple of days. But I would say those would be 2 that stick out right off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, you're right. We talked a little bit about it off air, talking about Alabama a little bit. I like the way they're using Jalen Milroe in the design run game in the interior. I think Bama's got one of the better interior offensive lines with Parker Brailsford, Jaden Roberts, and Tyler Booker, who's probably their most versatile guy across the board. I would agree with you on that one. But let's get into this one here, Dave. What is kind of the feel, before we go to Norman, what is the feel in Knoxville this week? Is it, I read some interviews who I think it may have been Omar Norman Lott or somebody, or Amari Thomas was talking about, like, Josh Heupel is not even brought up this being a game he's going back home. It's just kind of the next week. It's game 4 for Tennessee, SEC opener. What's kind of the vibe in Knoxville, though? Is it kind of on edge? Again, I know Tennessee's the favorite, but what are Tennessee fans' thoughts, your thoughts, just from a feel, just in Knoxville?
I think there's a couple of different feels. I think there's probably a minority that believes good things are going to happen. And then because of what Tennessee has been through the previous decade plus, not just in football, But in basketball, they had a couple of NCAA scandals. The late Pat Summitt passed away after her incredible run. They call it battered ball syndrome is what a lot of people call it. And I think that some people are waiting for the other shoe to drop, that something bad's going to happen. I don't think that's the case, because one of the things I have learned that I didn't know earlier in my career, I was covering Tennessee during a time that they had a great administration all the way up to the top of the chancellor. So I don't care who your head coach is. If it's Nick Saban, who's the greatest coach of mine and your generation, I don't care if it's him or not. If he doesn't have the proper support of his athletic director, his chancellor, and on up the board, then it's not going to work out. So,
Dave,
yeah,
who was the AD when you were? Was that Mike Hamilton?
Yes, Mike Hamilton was the AD. There, he made the really gutsy move of firing Philip Fulmer and bringing in Lane Kiffin, which I at the time thought was a good move. I didn't know Lane was going to up and leave after a year, and I certainly don't think Mike did. So I look at Tennessee right now, and I think their administration is strong. So I don't think there's impending doom coming, but there probably is 50% or more that's just waiting for something bad to happen. And you probably have to win a football championship for that to happen, but they did win a baseball championship, so maybe that number's a little bit lower than it was a few months ago.
No, Dave, I think you're right. Danny White's done a phenomenal job, like you said, not only from the Big Three sport, but also building kind of like if you're familiar with the battery type thing. I saw they released those plans outside of Neyland Stadium to kind of have a battery, kind of a social type setting outside of Neyland Stadium that I'm sure will even be crowded for basketball and baseball weekends when it's not even football season. But you're right. I mean, I think Tennessee right now, when you're talking Big Three sports, again, this is a conversation for another day, but I think I'm going to say it, it's probably the best athletics department in the SEC. I mean, if you talk about, like you just mentioned, Tony V's a young cat. I think he's going to be there for a while. Tony Vitello just won a national championship. He's going to be there. I know Rick Barnes gets hell. I know Tennessee fans get a little tired of him. I think sometimes it's overused a little bit. And again, I don't think people were disappointed last year. You told me you won the SEC, you made it to the Elite Eight, could have beat Purdue, went down to the wire. Then obviously you got Heupel, who seems like he's rolling. Big year, in my opinion, for him. Big game this weekend. I mean, there's probably not any other team in the SEC that feels that strong about all three of their big sport coaches. Would you agree?
Yeah, there have been times where I felt like I've been talking people off the ledge when good stuff's happening. It's like your life's perfect, things are going well, everything's fine, chill out. But things went so wrong for so long that contention of fans are still out there. Again, I don't subscribe to that anymore. Now, I thought when they had Philip Fulmer coming in as the athletic director and that whole mess, I was like, yeah, that's not going to work. But I think they've got a guy in place now that can raise funds. I think they've got a guy that can coach football. I think they've got a chancellor that supports the sport and really have been incredibly aggressive. I mean, they were the ones who, along with Virginia, sued the NCAA and won that lawsuit, which basically just opened up the floodgates for NIL, which in turn will make it a little bit more manageable because the schools are going to control that from now on, which is probably a good thing. So, no, I think Tennessee is at the forefront of a lot of the things they're doing, but those last 12, 14 years, pretty hard to forget.
Under the radar matchup this weekend, Dave. What is it under the radar position on position battle in this Oklahoma-Tennessee game that you're looking forward to watching?
I will say, I'll say Keenan Pili at middle linebacker in particular, not necessarily lined up against another position, but I think he's going to have a really big game. And I think that I thought that Keenan Pili was a type of, old time Dick Butkus middle linebacker. I'm in the middle of the field, but I've seen, the typical middle backer. But I've seen him because he was hurt after he transferred from BYU. He got hurt in the opening game last year, torn tricep. He was out for the year. It was a really sad deal. And then he got a 7th year. So he's 39 years old. No, I'm kidding. But he is an older guy, and he has shown more speed than I thought. So the guy that I'm looking forward to keeping an eye on most of all would be that. Another position matchup and this would be for any team that has above average or competent wide receivers. And I don't know that Tennessee's faced that this year, is anybody that does have decent wide receivers, and Oklahoma does, against a secondary that hasn't been tested at all. Dave, I have no idea how good this secondary is. We were talking before the show. They just haven't been tested. Nobody's gone after them because the defensive front has been so good, and or the offensive line for the opposing team has been so bad.
No, you're 100% right. We talked about that. You just said it. We talked about it off the air. That was one position. Because I was on a show today with somebody on a Texas show. They were saying Tennessee was elite in every position. I was like, yeah. And again, I don't think this is like a diss towards Willie Martinez, who's the position coach back there or anything. I feel like I know what I'm getting in the Jamad McCoy kid from Oregon State, because you go watch his film and he's flashed at times this year for Tennessee. But outside of him, it's like you said, it doesn't mean it's bad. Two things can be true at once. Like, I think it's better. And as you know, for Tennessee, it doesn't have to be like a no-fly zone like the Seattle Seahawks with Richard Sherman. It just has to be a solid unit. And I think people forget at times, everyone's pretty thin on the back end. I mean, probably the best, least amount of question marks in the SEC is maybe the team Tennessee's facing this week. I mean, they're loaded with safeties. But again, I think most teams, because of the portal and teams are playing 5-6 DBs in the nickel dime packages so much, the 7th, 8th DBs leaving to go play somewhere else. It's just you're playing true freshmen. I mean, look at Alabama. They have 6 scholarship corners. 3 of them are true freshmen. You're an injury or 2 away from being hurt. And like you mentioned, Oklahoma's had, 3 of their top 4 guys out. And Jalil Farouk, who broke his foot first catch of the season. Deion Burks is the only guy that's really been consistent. They're going to get Andrel Anthony back this week. And then who's the other one? I got my depth chart of Oklahoma pulled up right here. I'm missing it. Is out for the year. Who is the Gibson kid? So he'll be back. So it'll be interesting. You're right. It doesn't mean it's bad. I don't think it's been tested yet, because I don't think NC State. I always thought in that game. I saw your prediction too, Dave. Once Tennessee got up 2 scores, NC State could not have came back in that game.
Well, I think it was the Will Brooks interception that just took all life out of them. I think it was pretty much over at that point. You talk about position battles. The one that I think will be intriguing as well is Tennessee's defensive line. I think they're dominant and deep, but the more I think about it as the week goes on, they really haven't played much of anybody. Now, NC State was a difficult matchup because they ran a 3-3 in the box look. So that was a little bit more challenging, but I don't think they played physical monsters at all. And I don't think Oklahoma is an elite defense, but I think it's a good defense. And I think they'll be challenged a little bit more there. So, I think a lot of people going into this game think Tennessee's defensive lineman, because of their depth and the way they're able to rotate consistent players in, is going to be able to win the battle up front defensively. But let's see. I mean, UT Chattanooga was not good, obviously. NC State, after the interception you mentioned, it was over. And then the last team they played, Kent State. I talked to I don't actually gamble, but I do know a bookie. And so I talked to him, and he ran the numbers, the analytics, and Kent State would have been underdogs to 32 Division II teams. So what they did in that 70-point game, that was analogous to you and me running around as defensive players. Tennessee could have scored 150 points if they wanted to. That was a glorified scrimmage. So
almost the best bet of the day. I tweeted it Saturday morning last week. It's like, I feel like Tennessee minus 49 is stealing money against this Kent State team. I mean, because people get intimidated by that high number, and I get it. That's a photo shoot finish right there till the end to hold on to giving up 49 points before you even kick off. I mean, they were up 50-0 at half. I need to ask you. I feel like I heard, what was the onside kick up when they were up 30-0 about? Did he tell them he was doing that, or he told somebody?
I've heard a couple of different stories on that. I've heard it was a kicker audible, which sometimes they do have the option to audible then, but you probably shouldn't do it up 30 points.
30-0 against Kent State.
Against Kent State. I mean, that's not a good look. But back to your point about the spread, I think if people are out there gambling, the thing they need to remember on those big numbers is Josh Heupel cares. And he can tell me he doesn't care about 350 yards versus 299, about a certain number of touchdowns at the end of the season as opposed to less. I mean, he cares about numbers and statistics and those sorts of things. So if he's got the ability to tack on a little bit of extra, he's going to keep his foot on the gas. That's very, I think, Steve Spurrier-like going back in the day. So that number, I'm the same way. Again, I don't gamble, but I do like to follow those trends. That kind of number scares me away from almost every other team in the SEC except for two, and I've covered both of them: Josh Heupel and Lane Kiffin.
So you think if Heupel gets the chance to bury Oklahoma this week, he will?
There's no question in my mind. There's no, I mean, zero. I mean, because I would pick this as a 35. I would have it as a 35-13 game. I think Tennessee would win 35-13, except for the fact that I think if it's that type of situation, Tennessee will be presented with the opportunity to tack one on. And I will go ahead and tell you, if that opportunity is there, no doubt about it, they will tack one on.
Two more questions. Again, we're with Dave Hooker from Off the Hook Sports. Go give our guy the follow at the Dave Hooker. Dave, again, I appreciate you joining us. Two more questions, like I mentioned. We talked a little bit about it just a minute ago, secondary, and this may be the answer to this question from you. Where do you think Oklahoma can exploit Tennessee? Do you think it's just like that's it? There's no other spot. It's just the secondary with their receivers if they can come back healthy.
As far as where I think their defense overall is good. So, Tennessee's offensive line, I think is one of the better ones in the nation. But again, I have to go back to that. I'm not really sure because of who they played, but this will be the most challenging defense they played. So I think that what's going to happen in this game is that for the first time, Tennessee will get punched in the mouth. The other teams they played couldn't do that. So then it's how does Tennessee respond? Do they immediately respond? Does it take them a quarter to get settled in on the road? I heard you talking about the concerns about Josh Heupel on the road, and I think those are well founded. But I think that ultimately that whole psychological thing of playing a much more physical the football team could definitely surprise Tennessee early because it's been pretty easy skiing so far.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think too. Again, I just wouldn't even change my opinion on Nico. I mean, we all know Nico's got all the upside in the world. And from everything I hear from people around that across the board, checks the box of a great kid too. This is his first real road game, and he's going into an environment. Let's be honest. Oklahoma's really not used to playing, and again, it's not their fault. They're not used to playing massive games like this at home because they get Texas and Dallas every year. And granted, Bedlam sometimes, depending on how Oklahoma State is, maybe K-State or Texas Tech comes to town. But this is probably the biggest home game for them since what? When Ohio State came in 16 or 17, I forget, or when Notre Dame came in 13, something like, again, two non-conference opponents because the Big 12 just doesn't have those juicy matchups each year. And again, like I mentioned, their biggest rival, they play in the Cotton Bowl every year. First SEC game, hometown hero, former national championship winning quarterback coming. It's going to be some kind of vibe environment. There's no doubt about it. It wouldn't shock me if I will say this. I'll be a little surprised if Nico doesn't have a turnover in the first half. Again, I wouldn't judge him on that. It's his first road start. But I do think this is a very honest. The bet I like in this game is probably honestly Oklahoma in the first half. I could see that. I could see this being
I could see that.
I mean,
I could see Oklahoma in the first half. I do know that the idea behind Josh Heupel's offense, and I hate it when people say get off to a fast start because nobody says, I want to get off to a really slow start. I want to be really bad early in the game. So, but his idea is that you get up by a couple of scores and the defense plays vertically and attacks and attacks and attacks, and you hopefully create a turnover. You might give up some yards, but you create a turnover there. Getting back to the Nico point, I will tell you this. Of all the concerns that Tennessee fans should have, Nico should not even be on the list.
Correct.
I've heard so much about his maturity, his steadiness, that it's just not coach speak now. And I wouldn't be telling you this if other people have told me things off the record that led me to believe otherwise. I would also say going back to the Iowa game in the Citrus Bowl, I don't think he got enough credit for the fact that Iowa said, we're dropping everybody back. We're not going to give up those long passes, and you're not going to beat us like that. Now, if I'm a 19-year-old out there with a whip and an arm, I'm going to say, we'll see. But he didn't. He was very calm, calculated, took the stuff underneath, and they methodically beat the Hawkeyes, so what, 35-0.
Yeah.
So I know that's not a road environment. But I haven't been to Oklahoma. I've been to most of the SEC stadiums. I've been told it's not as daunting as, let's say, LSU, Florida. I would include Auburn, Alabama, in that mix of the ones that I thought got the loudest that I've been to. I've been told it's not that, but I can't tell you firsthand. But I will tell you this. I do not think there's any chance that Nico somehow has a bad game, chokes, or anything like that. I think he'll play at an exceptionally high level.
I agree. They're not going to lose because of Nico Iamaleava. That won't be the reason why if Tennessee were to lose this game. That's it. I mean, going back to, you go watch the film of Hendon Hooker in 22, obviously Joe Milton last year, and Nico this year. I think the things people get all excited about is the big explosive plays, the bombs over Baghdad plays to Brew McCoy, Jalen Hyatt, or Squirrel White here, for example. And I was using Jalen Hyatt really for Hendon Hooker 2 years ago. But I think the thing we underestimate just as college football fans is at times is just this, doing the simple things almost like it's effortless. And that's kind of what you had with Hendon Hooker, I feel like. I mean, how many interceptions did Hooker throw in 22? Was it 2 before he got hurt?
Like
he never turned the football over.
Yeah, it was 2 or 3. I think it may have been 2.
Yeah, and that one was so impressive with him in 22 is he did the simple things, a little hitch outside the numbers, just simple throws to Brew McCoy and Cedric Tillman and guys like that. It was almost effortless. With Joe Milton, you would see balls sail on top of it. It was just like, man, we can't even throw the simple ones. I think what we underappreciate for Nico, and again, this is only going to be his 5th start. The simple things with him so far. Again, there was a couple of plays against NC State. He tried to fit it in a tight window. But again, when you have that live of an arm talent, hand talent like he does, you're going to want that a little bit. But I feel like the thing I do appreciate with him is he makes the simple reads. Like he does. And I feel like we as college football fans and people that evaluate football take that for granted at times. But to remind us, you can just go back last year and watch how inconsistent Joe Milton is week to week with just the simple stuff, not the long bombs he can hit. Everybody talks about Joe Milton's arm strength. But the thing I appreciate with Nico and guys like Hendon Hooker that have been in the Josh Heupel system at Tennessee is just how simple they do the little things. And that's what I think translates over and makes them so good.
No, and I think that I agree with exactly what you said. And I think that Nico is a far more accurate passer. I go back to something that some coach told me in football really early in my career and said the most important thing about a passer is his accuracy, more than arm strength, more than mobility, more than anything else. And I think probably processing quickly is right up in there. But if you look at where Nico puts the football, it's always leading people out front, whereas technically, I know if it hits your hands, you're supposed to catch it. A lot of the drops from Joe Milton were back. He threw a very heavy, hard ball. He had trouble throwing with touch. I don't want to sound like a Nico defender here, but I'll say this. His 2 interceptions this year came off one when they had really poor pass protection, and another one that at the time I thought was an errant throw, and I did a little bit more digging into that. That was the interception over the middle to they were trying to throw it to Brew McCoy. I don't know if you remember that. And it looked like just a bad ball. Everybody throws a bad ball every once in a while. But I got a little tip. You may want to go back and look at the film from someone at UT. And I think Brew's a heck of a player. Everybody makes mistakes. But he was going to have to take on a pretty major collision. And I thought he let up a little bit.
Heupel mentioned that, right? Didn't he defend Nico there a little bit? He said that was on Brew, like that interception. I think when somebody asked him about that interception.
I haven't heard him say that. Now he might have said that on one of his coaches' shows. That would surprise me because he's pretty defensive of Nico. Actually, if he said that's on Brew, maybe Brew said. I could see Brew being the kind of leader. Actually, that makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. Sorry, it's been a long day. But Brew, I could see going to Josh Heupel. Why don't you say publicly it's my fault? And take a little pressure off Nico. I could see that being a real thing. Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. To give you an idea of Brew McCoy, he's really been accepted by the Tennessee family because of the things he's done. And Brew had a golf tournament to raise money for We all remember the Hamlin kid in the NFL with the
yeah, DeMar Hamlin.
Yeah, DeMar Hamlin. Yes. Sorry. So to get the chest defibrillators for high schools, he had a golf tournament. I mean, what college football player has a golf tournament?
Organizing that, yeah,
to raise money for that. So I could see that happening. I hadn't thought about that, but that's something.
No,
I talk about on my show.
Everything I've seen from Brew McCoy from like an interview standpoint, it comes off very first class. But Dave, before we get you out of here, we got to get you a prediction. But our guy Bryson DeMoss, Oklahoma guy, he watches the show frequently. Appreciate you listening, Bryson. Says Gaylord Stadium will be the loudest stadium Saturday. The fans are fired. Yeah, I'm sure if there's going to be a time where Gaylord Memorial is going to be rocking, it would be this weekend. I mean, game day's there again. Heupel's coming back, first SEC game. So I'm sure.
But the loudest stadium in what? I mean, come on. I mean, you're not even the sixth loudest stadium in the SEC.
Dave, you're about to get the audience fired up while you get at you.
I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, come on. I mean, go to LSU. I don't have a bias. I don't care. But go to Florida. Go to the Swamp. Go to Tiger Stadium. Go to Neyland Stadium. Go to Alabama. I have not been to A&M. I've heard great things about A&M. But I hate to tell you, you're in the bottom half of the SEC when it comes to home environments.
You have the pitchforks out as you walk out the door here tonight, Dave. I'm going to deal with them. But what prediction? Give us. What do you think happens on Saturday?
Now you want me out of here. 42-13. I think it would be a 35-13 game, but I think Josh Heupel will have an opportunity to tack one on, and he loves to do that. He did it against. Now I don't endorse it. I just want to be real clear because he did it 2 seasons ago against Missouri, and Missouri came back with a whole new defense because they had targeted that game because he ran up the score on Missouri. So I don't think it's the right move, and I'm not saying Heupel is a good coach for doing that. I'm just saying that's him.
Yeah, isn't Missouri kind of lucky they don't play Tennessee this year? He'd definitely try to run the score up on Drink this year.
Yeah, that whole thing, that whole, he thought he was going to get that job, and then Eli got that job, and then Eli took a shot at them. If you remember during SEC media days, there's like a weird rivalry there between those two guys. Yet there's no rivalry among the fan base. It's very odd.
Well, Dave, I appreciate you joining us, man. I know it's a little later, and I hit you up last night, but I've been following y'all recently for Tennessee content on Off the Hook Sports, guys. Again, Dave Hooker taking the time to preview the Tennessee-Oklahoma big matchup of the weekend. Hell, there's a lot of matchups in the state of Oklahoma. You got Utah, Oklahoma State will be a big one as well. But Dave, appreciate you again, guys. Go give a follow to our guy Dave at the Dave Hooker. Dave, I appreciate you joining us. We'll get you on again. Obviously, we talked a little off there. Probably that Alabama week we'll bring you back on, man. Because I'm assuming Tennessee's going to be in a bunch of big games this year.
Yep, I certainly appreciate it. Keep up the great work, and anytime, just let me know, and I might hit you up as well.
Perfect. Anytime, brother. Appreciate you, man. Have a good night.
Take care.
Later, brother. Again, guys, Dave Hooker from Off the Hook Sports joining us tonight. Does a phenomenal job with the Tennessee content over there, guys. But we got predictions left. We got predictions, and we got our final money-making weekend predictions as well. Let's get to a couple of comments. I know Bryson was on there earlier. Bryson had another comment as well. He's fired up for the game. 6:30 p.m. That is the kick at Gaylord Memorial. Have a good show, brother. Appreciate all your input. Appreciate you, Michael Anthony Osborne, listening, man. Means a lot. Appreciate you, man. You're the reason we can have these kind of shows. But let's get to predictions. It's Thursday. It's why we're here. It's why we're fired up. And let's get right to it. We usually go chronological order. This game's too big not to talk. Let's set the tone. Tennessee at Oklahoma. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone on ABC. You got the big dogs on this one. You got Kirk Herbstreit, Chris Fowler. Herbstreit doesn't even have to leave after game day. But Tennessee favored by 7. Point total 57.5. Like I mentioned, setting the tone here for you. This is the kind of game that doesn't need much explanation. When I was doing my homework, doing the research for this preview, unless you've been living under a bridge, you know how big this is. Josh Heupel coming back to his alma mater. He's the last quarterback to win a national championship at Oklahoma. They've had some good ones. Baker, Kyler Murray, Sam Bradford. Josh Heupel's the last one to win a national championship there. Oklahoma's first SEC game. We've talked about Gaylord Memorial Stadium. My guy Dave going after the Sooner fans, saying it's in the bottom half of the league in an atmosphere. Again, I've only been to Oklahoma once. That was when I was over recruiting at Kansas. Again, it probably wasn't. It was also the COVID season, so it was only 25,000 or 25% full. So that wasn't fair for me to judge Oklahoma off that. But also College Game Day will be there. Josh Pate will be there. Ton of people there. Phil's storyline was like a very WrestleMania, like WWE setting up The Rock coming back for a month. He's on Raw, SmackDown, and then finally the big WrestleMania matchup. That's kind of what it feels like because we saw this 2 years ago when it was announced. And then it was the first game for both teams in the SEC, Oklahoma's first game. Give the SEC a golf clap for setting that one up. They don't always schedule great in all sports and baseball and basketball. They got this one right. But the Vols have been dominant through 3 weeks, outscoring opponents 191-13. I said all offseason, 2024 was the season I was going to judge Josh Heupel. Again, I always said Tennessee's floor under Heupel is going to be 8. But where is that ceiling? Is it 9? Is it 10? Is it maybe 11? I think this year is going to determine if it's in that 9 or 10 range. And it's going to start this weekend. I think I saw a show someone was talking who needs this game the most. I think Tennessee and Josh Heupel do because it's Brent Venables in them's first season in the SEC. If Josh Heupel and Tennessee win this one, they're setting themselves up for a legitimate playoff run. I had Tennessee losing this game in the preseason. I had Tennessee 10-2, but I had this is one of their losses along with Georgia. But it's pedestrian and banged up as Oklahoma's been on offense. I don't know if I feel that way anymore. I mean, you got a first-time starter at quarterback. All of it's not Jackson Arnold's fault, but he just looks real uneasy. And again, you've had that many people go in and out on the offensive line. They've had 3 different centers in 3 weeks. 3 out of your top 5 receivers have been out. Will Branson Hickman, the SMU transfer, play this week? Looks like Jarian Hatchett, he's out. It's just a lot of lack of continuity. It's not Bill Bedenbaugh's fault. I mean, it's not Seth Luttrell's fault, who also was the starting fullback on that 2000 team. You remember Seth Luttrell, North Texas offensive head coach, now the OC for the Sooners. That's another storyline in itself. So Oklahoma on offense has been dealing with a lot of injuries. Not the start they wanted. They're 3-0, but they have struggled against teams like Temple and Houston offensively. On defense, though, I've said it all offseason. I think I'm not saying Oklahoma's the best defense in the league. I'm saying they have the least amount of question marks at all 3 levels, starting at the defensive line, linebackers, and the secondary. They have a lot of guys that have played a lot of football in Brent Venables' defense. Add in Zach Alley, who's kind of his Glenn Schumann to Kirby Smart. Oklahoma's one of the – this will be Tennessee's biggest test potentially of the season when you factor in where it is and how good this Oklahoma defense is. But what's going to happen, folks? You know that's the next point in this prediction. Look, just mentioned it some. The chess match between Josh Heupel and Brent Venables and Zach Alley. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a fun to watch. It's going to be a movie. It's going to be cinematic. And as we all know, Tennessee wants to run the ball at heart. Everybody says Tennessee wants to throw outside the numbers. And while that's true, Dave brought it up. They kind of like to get a fast start and then go attack you late. But they also run the football based just on the numbers it dictated, whether you have 5 or 6 men in the box. That's how they're determined. And like I mentioned, this could easily be Tennessee's toughest test all year from an offensive standpoint. Oklahoma, veteran defense, limited question marks. If Oklahoma can stop the Tennessee run game and Dylan Sampson, who's been phenomenal through 3 weeks as well, that bodes well for this Sooner team. And I say this to say, I do not think the Tennessee offense against Brent Venables is going to determine this outcome game. It's going to be something to watch. It's going to be the fun part to watch. But where this game will be won, I think, is on the other side. Yes, I mentioned it with Dave. I think Nico Iamilov is going to struggle for a good amount of this first half. I would be shocked, like I told Dave, if there's not a turnover from Nico in this first half. And I love Oklahoma minus 3.5 in the first half. And that's not going to change my opinion on Nico. It's his first true road start. Again, when I was in college football, it's different on the road. It's a true us versus the world mentality, the world against us, whatever you want to call it. We're backed into a corner, and all we got is us. And it's usually all you need, honestly. The juices are going to be flying. The emotions are going to be high, but he's got to tone it down for a young cat. I expect him to struggle a little bit at some point in this game. If not, I mean, that would be unbelievably impressive. But like I mentioned, Oklahoma isn't used to hosting big games, and that's not their fault because they play Texas in the Cotton Bowl every year, as Sooner fans know. And the Big 12 is very inconsistent each. I mean, yeah, maybe Texas Tech has a good team, K-State, Oklahoma every now and then, but it's still not the same like this. Oklahoma fans would probably tell you the juiciest atmosphere at Gaylord Memorial has been when Notre Dame and Ohio State came, and probably when Oklahoma State's been good from a Bedlam standpoint. But this game is going to be determined. Who actually wins this game is going to be determined between this Oklahoma offensive line versus Tennessee front seven. And this Oklahoma offensive line has struggled for most of the first 3 weeks of the season. And the Tennessee front seven is probably the best and deepest it's been in, call me crazy, the last 17 years, probably going back to 2007, when Philip Fulmer was there his second to last year, and they won the SEC East that year. That's how long it's been. I mean, think about it. With Derek Dooley, they had good offenses, terrible on defense. I mean, Lane Kiffin was there a year. Butch had one decent defense in 2016. There just hasn't been this depth. I mean, you got Omar Norman Lott, Amari Thomas, Bryson Eason, the Simmons kid. I mean, on the edges, you got James Pierce, who's been a little quiet so far. You got Joshua Josephs. They're deep. Dave brought up Keenan Peely. But the offense has been good, and even Nico's been inconsistent. But the thing that puts me over the top of this Tennessee defense from a playoff standpoint is the depth on this defensive front. And then from an Oklahoma Seth Luttrell standpoint, do they try to slow the game to keep Nico and the Josh Heupel offense off the field? Or recently, their tempo's gone up. If I'm them, I stick to what I'm good at offensively. It hadn't been a lot this year, but I'm not just changing what I'm doing. I think you go tempo. Tennessee's an explosive team. They can score from anywhere at any time. Don't overthink this if you're Seth Luttrell. Go with your bread and butter. Another thing to keep an eye on is this Tennessee secondary. Where does Oklahoma take their shots? Can they even protect to take shots? Because we mentioned it with Dave. I don't think the Tennessee secondary is bad. I trust Jamad McCoy, the Oregon State transfer. But how good is it? The NC State offense is not a vertical passing game. It's a triple option offense. Remember, Grayson McCall comes from the Coastal Carolina offense with Jamie Chadwell. They like to run the football. Once Tennessee went up 2 scores in this game, it was over. This will really test it, especially if Oklahoma can get some guys back like Nick Anderson. And they also have, obviously, Deion Burks going, and maybe you even see Bauer Sharp getting into this, the tight end. But how Oklahoma decides to attack Tim Banks in this ball defense will be a big deciding factor in this one. I've thought about this one for a long time, folks. I really have. I've thought about this one for a long time. I think this could be one of Tennessee's tougher games on the schedule when you factor in how early it is and where it is, all the distractions. I think this is close. I predicted a 13-point win for Tennessee on our official preview that we shot on Sunday night. But obviously more research, going back and watching the game a little bit, seeing some press conferences. I've come around to this one being a tight. I think this is a lower scoring game than people are anticipating. Remember, the point total in this one is going back up 57.5 right now. I think this is a lower scoring game than people are anticipating. First road start for Nico, and I'm tempering the expectations for those who expect a big game from him. And I think that's honestly unfair. But with that being said, I think Tennessee is slow to start in the first half. Remember, I like Oklahoma minus 3.5 in the first half. But Heupel makes adjustments in half. Nico makes some big-time plays and grows up before our eyes. And when I say grows up before our eyes, I'm not saying from a statistical box score standpoint. I'm talking about from a maturity, maturation, leadership standpoint. He has a big drive late in the game to put the Vols on top for good, and the defense holds their own en route to a massive SEC road win. Defense travels, folks. Tennessee fans aren't used to that. Tim Banks wills this Tennessee to a massive early season win where the defense has to get it done. This could be another springboard game like the LSU 2022 matchup at Tiger Stadium. Give me Tennessee 27-21. I feel like if Tennessee gets to 30, they easily win. They definitely win this game. And I thought early in the week, whoever gets to 31st wins, but I think Tennessee's defense is the story of the night. I just think this is going to be a big challenge for Tennessee early. A lot of distractions on the road, facing maybe the most complete defense you will see all year. Redshirt freshman in his first start. Defense gets it done. It's Tim Banks and the boys again. Give me Tennessee 27-21, folks. Give me Tennessee 27-21. What are the comments saying? They booing me in here? Hans the Gray. Is he in here yet? That guy's in here every episode. I want to give that guy a clap. He's in here for every episode, and I appreciate it. Michael Anthony says Heismans do not win natties at Oklahoma. Appreciate you listening, Michael. Yeah, you're right. They need to put some WD-40 on Nick Anderson. They need him. They need those weapons. And to be fair, some of that's not Jackson Arnold's fault. I mean, he struggled. He looks like a deer in headlights at times. But again, he's had so many different centers, different combinations of the 5 on the offensive line, that he's missing a lot of his playmakers. So I think you judge him later as the year goes. Even being unfair to him, you don't judge him just strictly off this game. But lower scoring game, but I do think Tennessee gets the win just because I think the difference is going to be Tennessee's defensive front versus Oklahoma's offensive line. Moving to the next one. Jeez. Arkansas at Auburn, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone on ESPN. Auburn favored by 3, the point total 56.5. Setting the tone for you here. What do we expect to see on the Plains Saturday afternoon? What do we see? Tell me in the comments, folks. What do we expect to see on the Plains? I mean, I have a decent idea, but again, I could script this in numerous different ways, like I said about the Florida A&M game last week. Auburn comes in 2-1. Arkansas comes in 2-1 as well after a heartbreaking loss to Oklahoma State. Again, Auburn's one loss in the L column was that ugly loss 2 weeks ago to Cal at home. But who needs this one more? I think the easy, low-hanging fruit answer is Sam Pittman because it's going to really affect his job this year. But I think overall, this would be a very bad loss and even a worse start for Hugh Freeze in year 2 after the equity he built up in the offseason in the spring and summer with the recruiting. I mean, Auburn has, 7 of the top 10 kids in the state Alabama committed. I think Ohio State has 2 committed and Alabama has 1. I mean, they have 70% of the top 10 kids in the state of Alabama. They had a top 5 recruiting class. A loss here and Auburn's real goals and aspirations as it pertains to this 2024 season would be over. I mean, I thought the goals, you should be 8-4, 4-4 in conference. They'd be staring at 5-7, 6-6 right down the barrel right there. I mean, it's the truth. And usually year 2 is a springboard year for these successful coaches. Nick Saban won the SEC West in year 2, played for the SEC Championship. Bob Stoops won the national championship in year 2. Urban Meyer won the national championship in year 2. Kirby Smart won the SEC, played for a national championship. Usually year 2 is a springboard year. Hank Brown, first start, the redshirt freshman. It's his first start. Again, he played against New Mexico. Not a very mobile kid. I think, again, I kind of somewhat agree with giving him a chance. But you mentioned Peyton Thorne. That takes out the zone read game, which actually was one of Peyton Thorne's strengths. So now defenses and Travis Williams, specifically this week for Arkansas, does not have to worry about Hank Brown really in the run game. And let's just be honest, folks. Auburn does not look good right now. It's not a good football team. Arkansas has looked good for about a game and a half. Critical under-the-radar game in the SEC this week. And I'm willing to say an elimination game to some extent. But what is going to happen first, guys? This is where the SEC Unfiltered Tour will be this week. Myself, Chris Phillips, will be on the sideline. We'll be there for this game. Again, I think Barstool Sports, Dave Portnoy and them are going to this game. I know everybody's going to Norman, Tennessee, Oklahoma game. That's fair. You should be. We just thought this was a sneaky under-the-radar game. It's not going to get the juice nationally, but from a conference standpoint, it's a big one. But what's going to happen, I think early on, Auburn offensively will try to get Hank Brown comfortable with easy throws. And Travis Williams, the defense coordinator at Arkansas, worked with him in Auburn and at UCF. Former Auburn linebacker, by the way. Former Auburn linebacker, played right next to Carlos Dansby on that 2004 undefeated team with Tommy Tuberville. He knows. I think he knows. I think I know, too. Auburn is going to try to establish the run. But Arkansas did keep a veteran offensive line and dynamic running back, probably the best running back in the country, Ollie Gordon, in check 2 weeks ago. I mean, they held the Pokes to 59 yards rushing, and I believe Ollie Gordon only had 2.9 yards per carry or something like that when I was looking it up. This game, though, specifically, so my point being, Arkansas can stop the run. They've proven it against a veteran Oklahoma State offensive line that's better than Auburn's, and against the best running back by most, Ollie Gordon. The game for Auburn, though, is going to come down to Hank Brown making plays and limiting mistakes. Sounds cliche, but it's the truth. The sport of football is not very hard, folks. First SEC start, who knows? Now, going to the other side, Bobby Petrino is going to have a hell of a game plan coming in, facing Auburn, DC, DJ Durkin. Now, remember, these two guys were on the A&M staff together last year. They faced off in practice. Now, some may say that was Jimbo's office. Bobby would probably tell you the same thing, at least from a terminology standpoint, but a conversation for another day. Like I said, fun fact, both these guys were in College Station last year for Jimbo Fisher's last year. And also, just like I mentioned with Hank Brown, can Taylon Green limit the dumb mistakes? We've seen his high plays. We've seen the floors a little bit. We've seen his floor. He's very comfortable throwing the football in the run, and that's where I would start him. I'd get him out of the pocket, get him comfortable and confident, and use him in the run game with Jaquindon Jackson, who used to be a quarterback himself. When I was in recruiting, Jaquindon Jackson's a Duncanville kid from Dallas. He was a quarterback. We recruited him as a quarterback. It's funny to see him just barreling people now. I had a massive game against Oklahoma State. But Auburn struggled last week with containing New Mexico quarterback Devon Dampier. And just with him getting out of the pocket, Auburn had a lot of busts because their corner and secondary players would leave their man and come try to chase down Dampier when he'd get out of the pocket. who does that sound like? That kind of sounds like a watered-down JV version of Taylon Green. And Hugh Freeze even said they need to improve that, and they're glad they got that on film. They can go back, bring that back to practice to their secondary and say, hey, you're going to face this again this week. And Hugh Freeze is exactly right. Taylon Green's going to present the exact same issues. And again, no real confidence in this pick, but it's wild to say, but I trust Arkansas more in this one. Because, think about it. If Arkansas just closed it out Oklahoma State, I think a lot of people are picking Arkansas in this one. But I'm taking Arkansas because I've seen them play well more consistently this year in the small 3-game sample size we have. I've yet to really see Auburn play well. I mean, I went back and watched the Alabama A&M a little bit, but again, that's a SWAC team. It's tough to take anything from that. The gap between SEC teams and the SWAC teams are bigger than ever, and it's always been big. Factor in, like we mentioned, Hank Brown's first start, first SEC game. Granted, it's at home, but Arkansas defensive coordinator Travis Williams should be salivating at some point with his pressure. Again, Auburn's going to want to kind of pass on their own terms. If it's an obvious passing down situation, Travis Williams is going to bring the house against an Auburn offensive line that has struggled to protect the quarterback at times. And again, Hank Brown is not mobile like Peyton Thorne. And Peyton Thorne isn't great. But again, like I mentioned, you had to factor in the zone read game with him. And because of his ability to run effectively in the run game, you saw it against Georgia last year and at times against Alabama. Hank Brown can't bring that. So it's a totally different dynamic Arkansas does not have to prepare for. At the end of the day, I trust Bobby Petrino and the Razorbacks just a little more. Call me crazy, folks. Sam Pittman and the boys get it done in double-digit fashion. Give me Arkansas 34-24. I think a late field goal, middle of the fourth quarter, puts this game away, puts Arkansas up 2 scores. Much-needed win for Sam Pittman and the boys. They are now 3-1, 1-0 as they headed to Arlington to face another winnable game against A&M next week. Auburn. Hey, I talked about those narratives at the start of this episode. Hugh Freeze could be in trouble. Again, not this year. I think he's fine this year. 2025, though. That's going to be the year. And again, we all know they're going to go to the portal, and they're going to give away their firstborn children. They're going to set the quarterback transfer portal market next year. Just keep that in mind. I do think it's going to be a big day, though, for Sam Pittman and the boys at Arkansas, and we will be there. Chris Phillips and myself, on behalf of the SEC Unfiltered channel, will be there. Let's go to the comments. Oh, they use Facebook and Dave don't recognize the guy. Hans the Gray, there he is, baby. The official OG. He's on Facebook using other names. I only know you as Hans the Gray, so you can't be coming in here as other viewers, but I do appreciate you, dude. Come on as you may. Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you listening. Going back to the Tennessee-Oklahoma game, our guy Dan Yoder, appreciate you listening, Dan. He says the Vols get the 42-21. I'm telling you, folks, if Tennessee, we're moving on. We got 2 more big games to preview, but if Tennessee scores 40 points in Norman on Saturday night, that's very impressive against that veteran Brent Venables defense. Michael Anthony Osborne, there you go. There you go. Appreciate you, Hans. All right, moving on to, we got 2 more big ones to cover. Again, this one. You made people be giving tickets to this one. Florida at Mississippi State, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone on ESPN. Florida favored by 6. Point total 58.5, setting the tone for both teams here. Both teams have first-class tickets on the struggle bus right now, folks. There is no denying that. First-class tickets on the struggle bus. No one should be favored in this one, but it says a lot about Mississippi State that Florida is giving up 6 points here. Florida's favored by 6 at Mississippi State after what happened to Toledo last week for Mississippi State. How is that possible after watching Florida as well? I mean, Florida's just gotten dominated against any Power 4 team going back to Miami and A&M last week. And like you said, if you watch Mississippi State at all against Toledo, that game was never close. It was 14-3. You thought State would make a run. 21-3, maybe 28-3. It was off to the races. Give Jason Candle and the Toledo Rockets credit. The game was never close. And let's call it spade a spade. Mississippi State is not a good football team right now. It's giving me real Chad Morris, Arkansas 2019 type vibes where they were a winless team in conference for 2 straight years. But I even think the good people in Starkville would admit it. That was an embarrassing loss last week. Now back to Florida. What is the motivation of this team rolling into Davis-Wade Stadium on Saturday around brunch? I mean, your coach is most likely not coming back next year, and it could even be as early as Sunday if Florida were to lose this one. Again, Florida's bye week is next week. That's usually when coaches get fired. There's 2 bye weeks this year, folks, so let that sink in. We're talking coaching changes. The matchup breakdown here, it's all over the place because both these teams are not playing good or even interested in playing football right now. You watch both these teams, Mississippi State's not well coached on the defense side of the ball. I think this is Coleman Hutzler's last year, the first time DC at Mississippi State. He just plays in a soft three-man front. I think our man Scattaboo from Arizona State's still running. He ran for 275 yards on him 2 weeks ago. Toledo put up 41 points on him. I mean, I'm just saying, Florida could – we'll get to – all right, what is going to happen? What is going to happen? This game gets me frustrated just because both these teams are not good football teams. But I'm actually excited to watch this game. I actually am. This will be a phone game or find a tailgate watch for me. Because remember, I'll be at Auburn. That game kicks off at 3:30 Eastern. This is the noon game. The SEC Unfiltered Tour is in Auburn. Remember that. But let's be honest. Your guess is as good as mine on who's going to win this game. Florida's best playmaker, Eugene Wilson, is out again. He's having surgery. I'm sure he'll redshirt. And let's be honest. Florida's the more talented team, and that is why they're favored in this one. It's 2 + 2 = 4. And that's why I'm going to take Florida in this one. I'm sorry. I don't have some in-depth matchup breakdown like I think I do with the other games, but this game is outside matchups, in my opinion. This game is a give-a-damn factor about both these teams. Who wants to come in here and give a damn? Who cares about winning this game? I'm asking, who cares about this game the most winning this game? I mean, does Florida have any give-a-damn about them? If they do, they'll out-personnel Mississippi State, out-talent them. Because I think if someone gets in a hole in this game, whether it's Florida or Mississippi State gets down quickly 14-17, nothing, I don't know if there's going to be much fight from the team who's down and gets into that hole. And especially you factor in how bad Mississippi State's been on first down. Listen to this stat. Out of 11 possessions versus Toledo last week, 7 out of the 11 first down plays were gains of 3 yards or fewer. They're doing nothing on first down, Mississippi State. So they're putting themselves in holes on second and third down. You're not going to win football games like that. I just think at the end of the day, it's going to be ugly. I think Florida just is more talented. I think offensively, Billy Napier can go put up some yards on the ground with Montrell Johnson, Trayon Webb. Then they can make some plays downfield off play action with Graham Mertz. I think DJ Lagway is going to be incorporated in the game plan. I think Florida wins this one. I think they cover 35-24. A lot of it is just because I think Mississippi State is so bad. I think this game's going to be what you expect. A little ugly, some penalties, turnovers. There'll be a ton of talk about Billy Napier's job timeline. Probably Jeff Levy, give him time, people. Like, he just needs to have an exciting product and not worry about wins in year one. And I'm here to tell you, Mississippi State is not a good football team, folks. It's a bad football team. They're staring at 2-10 right in the face. I mean, I really think you could play a drinking game with what will be discussed on this call. Again, every time there's an ugly play, a negative play, a penalty, a turnover, they talk about Billy Napier's job, how Jeff Levy just needs to have an exciting brand of offensive football because that's why Zach Selman hired him. Will you even remember the afternoon game if you played a drinking game with that? You could. It could be on the bingo card. But yes, I do think Florida gets the win. It's ugly, but Billy Napier survives another week. Give me Florida 35-24 with the cover. The last big game matchup before we get to the rest of the SEC. The SEC on SEC matchup here, folks. The third one. Vandy at Missouri. Missouri -20. The total 53.5, folks. The total 53.5 in this one. Vandy at Missouri, 4:15 p.m. Eastern on the SEC Network. Like I mentioned, Missouri favored by 20. The point total 53.5. Setting the tone. The juice behind this game was ruined last Saturday night at the TED, former Turner Field in Atlanta. Georgia State, Dale McGee and the boys defeated Vanderbilt 36-32. Vanderbilt had a late rally, and then Georgia State was up majority of that game. Vandy took the lead late, and then Georgia State went down and scored late to put it away. But ruining the undefeated showdown at Faurot Field on Saturday afternoon. Come on, Vandy and Clark Lee. But complete letdown for Clark Lee and his squad, and it got the best of me. I think that line against Georgia State's like 10.5. I said it on our previews. Like, it's a sleepy game because they're fired up. They already beat Virginia Tech. They beat Alcorn State. They want to get to 3-0 for this SEC opener. Looks like they were looking ahead a little bit. Again, Missouri, they're also not coming in off their best performance. But at the end of the day, they're coming off a top 25 win over a Boston College team in a first year with Bill O'Brien. If that's a bad day in Columbia, Missouri now, that kind of shows you the job Eli Drinkwitz has this Missouri program. It shows you the direction Eli Drinkwitz has this Missouri program rolling. If they're just upset off not playing well, some penalties, getting some guys back for the first time off a top 25 win. I think Missouri has looked good across the board defensively with new DC Corey Bertoon. Remember, Blake Baker was the DC there last year. He's now at LSU. They went into last weekend not even giving up a single point all year. Granted, to Murray State and Buffalo. and they even had lapses last week, but they forced critical turnovers from Thomas Castellanos, the quarterback at Boston College. So I think the defense played well across the board outside of some penalties and some breakdowns, not getting calls in. If you go back and watch, that's what it seemed like. Also think Brady Cook still isn't quite there from a consistency standpoint for Missouri to maybe be a true contender left. It's almost like I say all the time. It's like Steve Kerr drawing up a great play for Steph Curry in the corner. Now, I'm not comparing Steph Curry and Brady Cook together, but he's missed Luther Burden, Mookie Cooper, Theo Weiss, some of these guys on some deep plays at the third level that you're like, man, when you're playing Alabama, when you're playing Oklahoma, maybe when you're even playing with Vanderbilt, even though I think Missouri has a much more athletic advantage against Vanderbilt's secondary, you can't leave those points on the table. You can't leave the meat on the bone. That is something I'd watch with Brady Cook. Maybe I'm wrong and it doesn't hurt him, but it's just something that's sticking with me. But other than that, besides just some dumb mistakes on defense from getting a call in, penalties, and Brady Cook leaving some meat on the bone vertically, Missouri's had as good as a start as you could have asked in 2024. As I mentioned earlier, Vanderbilt coming in as a bit of surprise, really known for that big win against Virginia Tech in the opening weekend, but still disappointed in last week's performance. But speaking of it, give Clark Lee credit for making the call in the offseason, promoting himself to the defensive coordinator, and then hiring Tim Beck over from New Mexico State. And he brought in a couple of his other guys like Diego Pavia to run the triple option. And I appreciate Vanderbilt knows we can't go run the same offenses as the other teams in the SEC. We got to be a little different. And while everybody else is zigging, let's go zag. Let's be different. I want to give Clark Lee a golf clap credit for that. I know they're coming off a loss, but give him some credit. But what is going to happen? I think Vanderbilt will want to come in and establish the spread option attack with, like I mentioned, Diego Pavia. Now, Missouri may welcome that with open arms as they held BC, Boston College, in check last week. But this run game, this style is going to be a little different to defend, with essentially being a spread option attack and Pavia being that leading rusher alongside Cedric Alexander. But now the other thing that will determine this thing will be turnovers and third down. If Vanderbilt wins, if Vanderbilt wins, or this game is close in the fourth quarter, it will be because of this. Vanderbilt's defense has one of the worst opposing third down conversion rates in FBS, allowing 42.5%, which ranks 106 in the country. The Tigers are the opposite on the other end, though. They're looking at my notes here. They're the opposite looking at these rankings, ranking fourth in the country in offensive third down conversion rate at 59.6%. So I don't see that happening. But on the other side of things, the Commodores have only turned it over one time so far this year. And I think that's because they're running the football and shortening the game so much. They come in +3 in turnover margin. That's good for 14th nationally, and it's tied overall with Missouri, honestly. But I just don't think there's going to generate enough explosive plays for Missouri. I think Missouri has a massive advantage with their receivers against this limited athletic Vanderbilt secondary. Remember, Vanderbilt moves their starting inside linebacker to secondary in Taylor in this offseason. So there's not a lot of athleticism or speed. I think Eli Drinkwitz, Kirby Smart understand that. Kirby Moore, understand that. I just don't think Vanderbilt's going to generate enough explosive plays and honestly be good enough on third down to win this game. Give me Missouri something like 34-14 right at the line. That's a 20-point win. That's what the line is, and it's pretty much right at the point total. But give me Missouri 34-14. Again, Missouri's schedule probably a little tougher than we even gave it credit for going in. I thought they would cakewalk, and they should, into that game against Kyle Field, at Kyle Field. We thought Boston College would be easy. Again, first year head coach Bill O'Brien, he's done some good things with that offense. It was a challenge for Missouri. I think Vanderbilt's a little better than we gave him credit for heading into the offseason as well. Let's look at some other games. Let's go to the comments first. Dan Yoder, Florida is about to become the dumpster fire Tennessee was before Tennessee brought Danny White and Heupel showed up. True. They got to get their administration in line. They really do. They got to get the collective in line as well if they want to go win some big games. I agree with that, Yoder. I do agree with that. Looking at some other action around the SEC real fast. Let's pull up the banner. The rest of the SEC. What do we got here? We got Ohio at Kentucky, 11:45 Central Standard Time Zone kick. Yep, on the SEC Network. Kentucky favored by 20, over under 41.5. This was mentioned on maybe a game that the SEC could be on the brink of losing. I mean, we've seen it the first 3 weeks. I don't think so. Sandwich game between an ugly game against South Carolina 2 weeks ago, Georgia this past week, and then before their trip to Oxford to play Ole Miss, their first SEC road opener. I could see them sleepwalking a little bit through this. I just want to see some kind of identity from Bush Hamden and Brock Vandagriff here. I do think Kentucky wins. I don't know if they cover. They just need a win. UCLA at LSU. 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone kick. LSU favored by 22.5. Over under 56.5. I like the point. I like the line here. LSU team total 40.5. I think LSU scores over 40 points here. UCLA's defense is bad. Remember, the Anton Lynn, the defense coordinator at UCLA, left to go across the street to USC, and he's done a good job with USC. And then, they did a good job against LSU. We'll see how they do in the big house this week against Michigan, but they've lost that. I think LSU bounces back. They don't have a hangover game coming off that emotional win against South Carolina because UCLA is not very good. I like LSU to cover this game. Bowling Green at Texas A&M. That's a 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time kick on ESPN Plus, SEC Network Plus. A&M favored by 22.5. Over under 51.5. Mike Elko won't announce a starter. He won't announce. He says every week they will go in not really announcing who the starter is between Marcel Reed and Connor Wigman. I think two things can be true at once. I think Connor Wigman has the most upside at the quarterback spot for them, but I also think at the same time Marcel Reed fits. He fits what Colin Klein wants to do. Remember, Colin Klein likes to run a quarterback. Again, I'm not saying run Marcel Reed in between the tackles, but if you go look at Colin Klein and do homework, he himself was a running quarterback between the tackles. He had Skylar Thompson, who's starting this week in the NFL. He ran in between the tackles. Will Howard, who is now at Ohio State, he runs in between the tackles. He's comfortable doing that. That's not in Connor Wigman's repertoire, I should say. I'd go with Marcel Reed. I get why Elko's not coming out about it, but A&M better be careful. You better not just be fat and happy after, I know, beating a bad Florida team, but ending that 2-year-long road losing streak in the league because you got a Bowling Green team, a MAC team that's giving an SEC team hell every week, if not straight up beat them, that played Penn State down to the wire in week 1. You better be careful. I like A&M to win the game. Cover could be a little scary, though. Cover could be a little scary. If you made me bet, I would say they would. But again, it's a little scary game. Akron at South Carolina, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time Zone on ESPNU. South Carolina favored by 27.5. Over under 42.5. Hammer the over under. I hear Lenore Sellers is not playing, which means Robbie Ashford's going to play. South Carolina is heading into a bye week. I think they're just going to try to get through this one before Ole Miss comes to town in 2 weeks. Familiarity here in the SEC. Akron head coach, former Mississippi State head coach, Joe Moorhead. The Zips aren't very good this year. They're 1-2. Got hammered by Ohio State to open the year. Lost to another Big Ten team in Rutgers, and they got a win last week against Colgate, 31-20. It's a game South Carolina should win. They should win, but I like the under. I really do like the under because I don't think they're going to try to show much on offense. Robbie Ashford's probably going to play a lot of the game. He struggles to pass the football. I think this could be a quick, fast game. I kind of like the under in this one, 42.5. South Carolina does win, though. Georgia Southern at Ole Miss, 7:45 Eastern on the SEC Network. Ole Miss favored by 36.5. Over under 66.5. I don't know. Does Ole Miss cover this? Clay Helton, former USC coach, is the head man in Statesboro for Georgia Southern. That's one of Lane Kiffin's buddies. I think that's one of the few people he would not run the score up on. I don't know. Ole Miss is going to win this game. I think they're kind of just getting tired of playing. I mean, they played a preseason schedule, opening up against Furman, Middle Tennessee, at Wake last week, and now this week Georgia Southern before they get Kentucky coming to town, and then at South Carolina. The next 2 weeks was opening up league play. I could see Ole Miss not covering here. They could if they want, but again, it's one of Lane Kiffin's buddies, Clay Helton. He's not going to want to embarrass him. I could see him getting some guys in this game early. I could see an Austin Simmons, Walker Howard early because Jackson Dart, with his ability to run, is taking some shots early. You got to get him. We're not even to conference play yet. Lane Kiffin knows that. Ole Miss wins this game. May not be as pretty. You may not see the starters as much, but they do get the win here. ULM at Texas, 7 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus, SEC Network Plus. Texas favored by 44.5, over under 52.5. Arch Manning getting the start. I think this is a game you want to see. I mean, ULM's coach already kind of came out and said Texas is going to overlook them, which may not be true. I mean, they got Mississippi State next week, Texas, maybe looking ahead to the SEC opener. You see Arch Manning there. I don't think there's a quarterback controversy. Arch Manning's got a higher ceiling than Quinn Ewers, more athletic, but again, Sark states all the time he doesn't like to run scheme stuff, design stuff to run his quarterback because they can take shots. Quinn Ewers has played in the big games. So yeah, I think Arch could get through ULM and Mississippi State. You don't want Arch starting his first away from DKR game in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma where Brent Venables throwing him different looks, or much less when Kirby Smart and Glenn Schumann come the very next week. It doesn't even make sense, guys. Quinn Ewers has played in these big games. He's played in Bryant-Denny. He's played at the Big House. He's played in the college football playoff. This is a non-negotiable, guys. You just have a phenomenal – there's not a quarterback controversy. You just have a beautiful thing in that room. You have the best quarterback room in the country. I think you see some other young guys like Colin Simmons, 5-star signee they signed on the defensive side of the ball, kind of step up as well. Texas handles business. I'm interested in seeing some of their younger cats. But that's a wrap up from the rest of the SEC. Timothy Green coming in. I think this is going to be a week of big upsets in the SEC that are very unexpected. I mentioned it, some narratives that we could be used to saying. We've seen it all 3 weeks. You're right. Some teams need to be careful to not be getting taken to the brink, to the wire in the fourth quarter this week. I agree with you, Timothy, and I appreciate you listening. Last thing, folks, we've gone in, 75 minutes at this point. Let's get to it. Let's get to the money-making weekend, week 4 bets from your boy here. Again, guys, I appreciate you listening. Before we get out of here, though, before we get into the money-making weekend, again, guys, go like, subscribe, follow us on all social media platforms on Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Go to our YouTube page. Again, guys, life is busy. You have kids. You have a job. You can't keep up or go to our YouTube page whenever you want to see what videos. So that's why you click the notification bell. So every time we do post a video, which is about like 8 to 10 times a day, you get that notification. When I go live on Monday and Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, you get that notification. So do yourself a favor and do that, guys. But money-making weekend, folks. Week 4, I got 8 good ones. I had 12 for you last week. For the season, we're upfront and honest, guys. The film hasn't been pretty the first 3 weeks. We've gone back, reviewed the film, not good. We're 14-21, but you know what? I've said it all year. Week 4 is when we start to learn about these teams. We're going to be coming on strong. So let's get to it. First bet I like. I mentioned it in the LSU-UCLA preview. I like LSU team total over 39.5. I think LSU scores over 40 points. I think they can do it through land and sea, through the air and sea, whatever you want to call it. I think they can do it with Garrett Nussmeier, Kyron Lacey. I think you see this is a big game for Caleb Jackson, I think, as well. I think against a bad UCLA defense who Indiana hammered last week, middle of the day, still in the summer kind of feel weather at 2:30 in South Louisiana. I think that defense gets worn down. Give me LSU team total over 39.5. Next, let's go to Oxford. I think Ole Miss team total 50 or team total under 51.5. Is that right? Yeah. No, sorry, the game under 51.5. That's what I'll go. I'll go Ole Miss, Georgia Southern, total 51.5 in that game. I feel pretty confident in that. What do y'all think? No, hold on, I'm reading it right. Sorry, team total 51.5. That's what I went. I'm looking at it. The point total 66.5. I'm gonna go Ole Miss under 51.5. I was getting confused here when I typed this note here. 51.5. I don't think Lane Kiffin's gonna try to go run the score up on Clay Helton, like I mentioned. Jackson Dart's not going to play the whole game. They're going to have a redshirt freshman, Austin Simmons, who they like, the lefty who plays baseball, middle reliever as well. You have Walker Howard. I just don't think Ole Miss really tries to do a whole lot this week. I think they're getting a little bored, looking ahead to conference play next week against Kentucky. I just don't think they generate a ton of offense this week. The last SEC game, before we get into some non-conference games, South Carolina, Akron. I mentioned, I've heard through the grapevine, Lenore Sellers is not going to play with that high ankle sprain. That means Robbie Ashford. They're about to be into a bye week. They're just going to try to get through this against a bad Akron team. Led by former Mississippi State coach Joe Moorhead. I'm going to take the under in this game, 45.5. I feel pretty good about that one, especially with Robbie Ashford playing. It's one of my more confident picks. So those are the 3 SEC ones. LSU team total over 39.5. Ole Miss team total under 51.5 against Georgia Southern. And then the game total, South Carolina, Akron, under 54.5. Next, Nebraska, Illinois. First half under 21.5. You notice I'm going these point totals, first half totals. I think it's a low-scoring game coming off a big win for Colorado. That's tomorrow night, by the way. I like both these defenses. I just think it's going to be a little sloppy in the first half with Dylan Raiola and the boys, Brent Bielema and them. Ryan Walters will have a good plan defensively. I think a low-scoring game in the first half. Give me Nebraska, Illinois, first half under 21.5. I like Washington State tomorrow against San Jose State. Team total, another team total, folks, over 34.5. I think Washington State, after the big win against Washington last week, I think San Jose State gave up it's a sack state, I think like 24 points. Now, granted, they didn't give up a lot against Kennesaw State in their last opponent, but I think Washington State by far the best offense they've seen. I think it's a big day offensively for the Cougs and Wazoo. Give me Washington State team total over 34.5 against San Jose State. Kansas coming off a big loss last week at home at Children's Mercy. playing their non-conference games that year because they're doing a stadium renovation, and they're actually playing their conference games, Big 12 at Arrowhead. Interesting. Fun fact. I like Kansas +2 at West Virginia this week. I think it's a big game for Kansas to get back. It's also a big game for West Virginia as well. I mean, Neil Brown could easily give. I mean, you lose the way they lost the backyard brawl against Pitt last week. That's a tough loss. They could get beat 2 weeks in a row. That Pitt loss could count too, because I think Kansas comes in there sleeping. I like Kansas to win straight up, but I like Kansas right now +2. Give me the Jayhawks. I think Jaden Daniels plays well in this one. Or Jalen Daniels plays well in this one. I'm riding the Hoosiers. I talked about it. I rode them last week, -3 against UCLA. They hammered them. Give me Indiana -28.5 this week against a bad Biff Poggi Charlotte team. I think this is the easiest bet of the day. Give me Indiana and Kurt Signetti and the boys -28. Army, the Cadets, the Black Knights. Give me -6 against Rice. Rice is not a good football team. Give me Army. Army's a pretty good football team this year. I mean, Rice 1-2 got rocked against a bad Houston team. Their only win is against Texas Southern. They lost to Sam Houston State to open up the year. I like Army. I like the Black Knights in this one, -6 at home. I think this is a pretty good one as well. Then finally, I like Louisville, -6 in the first half against Georgia Tech at home. Louisville is the best team in the country that you can't name me a player from. That's how it is. I was listening to a show today, and they said the exact same thing. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I mean, they got Tyler Shuck, who came over from Oregon. They got a lot of transfers coming in. They are Corey Brooks, the receiver, transferred in from Alabama. They got a lot of players you don't even know, but they're a pretty solid team to look out for in the ACC. I like them to get the job done against not as probably good Georgia Tech team as we thought after week 0 when they beat Florida State. This is the most confident I've been in, guys, and it's why I don't have as many games this week. I picked 8 instead of 12 like I have been going. But money-making weekend, guys. Write this down. I'm giving you a minute to grab a pen and paper so you can write these down, put these in your phone notes. Money-making weekend, week 4, folks. Here it is. LSU team total over 39.5 against UCLA. They're going to light up a bad Bruin defense. Ole Miss team total under 51.5 against Georgia Southern. Last tune-up game before league play starts with Kentucky for Ole Miss. It's Clay Helton, Lane Kiffin's buddy. Jackson Dart's taking some shots. They're just trying to get to conference play healthy, and he's not trying to embarrass his buddy. Under 51.5 team total for Ole Miss. South Carolina, Akron, under 45.5. Akron doesn't get much going against a good South Carolina defense. Robbie Ashford, full-time starter because Lenore Sellers with a high ankle sprain. They're going to let him rest up for 2 weeks for Ole Miss. I think South Carolina just tries to get out of this one. Give me the under 45.5. Nebraska, Illinois first half under of 21.5. I can see Nebraska sleeping this one in, coming off the big game against Colorado. Or sorry, I should say sleepwalking into this game. Dylan Raiola, I like Ryan Walters, the DC at Illinois. I think they have a good plan. Low-scoring game in the first half, 21.5. Washington State team total over 34.5. They have a big night tomorrow. We got 2 tomorrow. Man, like I mentioned, Nebraska, Illinois, Washington State, the late one. I think they score over 34.5 against the Spartans of San Jose State. Kansas, sleepy walking into Morgantown. This could be the loss for Neil Brown that eventually gets him fired. And maybe you start hearing Jimbo Fisher or Rich Rodriguez's name as the next guy in Morgantown. Give me the Jayhawks. I like them up in a money line pick, but give me the 2 points. Give me the 2 points. I like Jalen Daniels bouncing back, Lance Leipold and the boys. Indiana, -28 against Charlotte. Charlotte's a bad football team, folks, and Indiana is an improved football team. Give me the Hoosiers at home. Army, -6 against a bad Rice team. I like the Black Knights at home. And then Louisville, like I mentioned, the best team no one knows anything about. -6 first half against probably a little bit. We overestimated Georgia Tech team after week 0. Folks, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, sorry. We got 9, actually. I miscounted. We got 9. We're going 9-0 this week, folks. I hope you wrote those down. I will tweet it out tomorrow. But those are the picks. Money-making weekend. It's going to improve, guys. Again, even these teams don't even know what they're expecting week to week, especially the first 4 weeks. More film's getting in. We're getting the conference play. These bets are going to go up, folks. These bets are going to go up. But, guys, I appreciate you joining us on this episode of Dave Talks Ball. We had our guy Dave Hooker come on, preview the Tennessee game. Got some Oklahoma fans fired up talking about how it's not a very hostile environment. Who knows? I think it'll be hostile Saturday. He thinks Tennessee pulls away, wins big, and he thinks Josh Heupel's going to pour it on if he gets that opportunity. We talk about narratives. What could we be talking about after week 4? I talked about Josh Heupel's road record. If he were to lose this game on Saturday, Josh Heupel would be 5-8 in 13 SEC road games going back to 2021, his first year in Knoxville, and 5 of those road wins being at Kentucky and Vanderbilt. 2 against Kentucky, 2 against Vanderbilt, the other one being on the road at LSU. 2025, if Hugh Freeze loses this game Saturday against Arkansas, Hugh Freeze's seat's going to be warm in 2025, and they're going to go hit the portal big. And then someone mentioned it could be an upset weekend for the SEC. What SEC team is going to be taken to the brink this week? We've seen it in week 1, Old Dominion, South Carolina. Week 2, Alabama, South Florida, Houston, Oklahoma, Nichols, LSU, Cal beating Auburn. Week 3, Georgia, Kentucky, Toledo dismantling Mississippi State, Georgia State, Vandy, UAB, Arkansas. It's happened every week. Who is it this week, folks? And then finally, we broke down all the Big Four matchups from the SEC this week and the rest of the league as well. Remember, Alabama and Georgia are off this week before their big showdown in Bryant-Denny Stadium next week. And then finally, the money-making weekend picks, all 9 of them. We're going 9-0 in week 4, folks. We're getting that 14-21 record up. Guys, I appreciate you joining. It should be. People think this is a sleeper week. That's when usually chaos happens, guys. But for myself, Dave Shoemate, the rest of the guys at the SEC Unfiltered channel from the SEC Unfiltered family, hope you have a phenomenal weekend. See you on Monday.